The Fourth Way by P.D. Ouspensky. And this is a continuation of chapter 6. And let me just remind you that Ouspensky was a student of Gurdjieff's. So it's always Ouspensky who's asking the questions, and the answers are given by Gurdjieff. Question: how can we trust our own sense of right and wrong? Answer: you cannot trust or mistrust. It is there. So it is not the question. You can only hesitate and be in doubt in relation to the object. Certainly without knowledge, without development, without consciousness, you cannot say definitely whether something is right or wrong, but you may be on the way to it. Morality is always different, but moral sense is permanent. If people have no moral sense, it is no use speaking to them. But the feeling of right and wrong is one thing, and the definition, the contents, is quite another. Two people may have a very strong feeling of right and wrong, but what is right for one will be wrong for the other. Feeling does not presuppose definition, so a man can have a feeling of right and wrong and have wrong ideas about it. Question: would the standard to apply be whether particular... Oh, let me start the sentence again. Question: would the standard to apply be whether a particular thing helps or hinders consciousness? Would the standard to apply be whether a particular thing helps or hinders consciousness? Answer: the standard must be connected with a system. Without a system, and I do not mean this system, but one must have a system. Without a system, you cannot judge. This system begins with the possibility of objective consciousness, and objective consciousness is described as a state in which we can know truth. If, when we reach it, we can know truth, we shall also know what is right and wrong. Consequently, the same way which leads to objective consciousness leads also to the understanding of right and wrong. As we have not got objective consciousness, we consider everything that helps us to develop as right and good, and everything that hinders us in this as wrong and bad. In our ordinary understanding, objective truth refers more to the intellectual side of life, but a man may want to know it is also on the religious side, the moral side, the aesthetic side, and so on. The system explains that men 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 are all in different positions in this respect. There is religion, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, and so on, and there is morality, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, and number 5, and so on. It does not mean that one or another of them is wrong, but that one cannot be explained by another. For instance, Christ did not preach inquisition, and if his teaching is distorted by men 1, 2, and 3 to be used for criminal purposes, this cannot be attributed to Christ. Since we are men 1, 2, and 3, there are many things about which we can find no visible indications as to whether they help or hinder the development of consciousness. So we must look for other principles, and we can find these other principles only if we think about concrete cases of conduct. In the system, one can find many sufficient indications which show how to look at one thing or another thing. Question: do you think that in the course of time, a new belief in morality can spring from this system? Answer: from this system, no. That is quite a different thing. These ideas are not for the masses, nor for the multitude. You must remember that this is school teaching, and school teaching can exist only for schools. In favorable circumstances, perhaps schools can increase, but that is quite a different thing. It is not the same as appearance and growth of a religion. The aim of the system is to bring man to conscience. Conscience is a certain faculty that exists in every normal man. It is really a different expression of consciousness, only consciousness works more on the intellectual side and conscience more on the moral side. It helps to realize what is good and what is bad in one's conduct. Conscience is a state in which one cannot hide anything from oneself, and it must be developed in man. This development is parallel and simultaneous with the development of consciousness. We cannot say that we do not have it, so it does not mean a special development of something that does not exist in us. Only in our life is it behind the scenes, buried, very deep down in us and asleep. It may awake for a moment in ordinary life, and when it does, particularly at first, it always brings suffering, for it is very unpleasant to face the truth about oneself. Conscience, in relation to emotions, is the same as consciousness in relation to ideas. It may be easier for you to understand that what conscience is if you think of the etymological meaning of the words consciousness and conscience. Consciousness means all knowledge connected together, but we cannot speak of all knowledge because it would be too high. We can only speak of all knowledge that we have relating to the same subject. It must be connected with self-awareness. So, self-consciousness must be yourself, connected with all that you know about some particular thing. Conscience is the same thing, only in relation to emotions. To have a moment of conscience is to feel at once all that you feel about somebody or something. If you can feel all that you ever felt in relation to the same person, country, house, book, or anything else together, it would be a moment of conscience, and you will see how many contradictions there are in your emotions. Unless you've had this experience, you cannot imagine how many different feelings you can have. In a state of conscience, we see them all at once. This is why it is such an unpleasant state. Conscience is not very far, only we have many methods of dealing with it to prevent ourselves feeling it, such as imagination, negative emotions, justifying, and so on, for it is too uncomfortable. You said that conscience is feeling all our emotions at the same time. I cannot quite see how we can feel them all together. Answer: no, I never said that. I said that in a moment of conscience, whether you wish it or not, you will feel all your emotions on the same subject at once. But it is not a definition of conscience. Conscience can be defined as an emotional feeling of truth on a given subject. As I said, conscience is the same thing as consciousness, only it looks different to us. We are subjective, so we take things from a subjective point of view. When we think about consciousness, we think about a certain force, a certain energy or state of connection with intellectual appreciation. The same energy, the same force can manifest through emotions, and this may happen to quite ordinary people in ordinary conditions. Sometimes people may have an emotional feeling of truth, some more, others less. This is conscience. Lack of consciousness, absence of self-remembering, and many other things such as identification and imagination shut us off from these moments of conscience, which otherwise would be more possible. Try to think about it in this way. Seeing contradictions and conscience are connected, but they are not the same thing. And if you take them together, you will never get anywhere. Let me read that sentence again, because that seems profound. Seeing contradictions and conscience are connected, but they are not the same thing. And if you take them together, you will never get anywhere. Our consciousness, such as we can have in our state, cannot manifest through the intellectual center, because the intellectual center is too slow, since it works mostly only with the formatory part. But it can at times manifest through the emotional center. And then, as I said, it's called conscience. Consciousness, to manifest, needs long preparation, intellectual capacities, and things like that. But conscience works more often and more easily than full consciousness. Okay, it says here, then full consciousness. I wonder if he meant then full consciousness. I'm going to read the sentence again. Okay, I'm going to read it with the word fall in it, but I think the word that he actually means is full. Okay, consciousness to manifest needs long preparation, intellectual capacities, and things like that. But conscience works more often and more easily than full consciousness. Oh, and then the next sentence is full consciousness, so it starts off with full consciousness. So I guess that's what he meant in the last sentence. All right, so it's a typo. Full consciousness needs much knowledge connected with the realization of one's existence. But it must be a constant realization. It's not enough to realize it today and to forget it tomorrow. At first, when conscience manifests itself in us, it turns against us and we begin to see all our inner contradictions. Usually we cannot see them because we're always in one or another small compartment. But conscience can see from the top and show us that here we felt one thing, there another, and here again quite a different thing, all on the same subject. For instance, if we take the work, we must realize that at one moment we feel one thing about it. At another moment we feel quite another thing. At a third moment again a different thing. And we never feel it all together. If we could feel at the same time all that we felt about the work, we would have a great shock. That would be conscience. All our life, all our habitual ways of thinking have only one aim: to avoid shocks, unpleasant feelings, unpleasant realizations about ourselves. And this is the chief thing that keeps us asleep, because in order to awake, we must not be afraid. We must be brave enough to see the contradictions. Even quite apart from the question of conscience, it is important to find in yourself that when you have strong emotions, in brackets, it does not refer to small emotions, close bracket, when you feel strongly about some particular thing, you may be practically certain that at another moment you will have a different emotion about the same thing. If you cannot see it in yourself, see it in other people. When you realize the existence of these contradictory emotions, it will help you to understand your mechanicalness and your lack of understanding of yourself, lack of self-knowledge. So long as we feel different emotions at different times, what are we like? One moment we trust, another moment we are suspicious. One moment we like, another moment we dislike. So the aim is to bring these different emotions together. Otherwise, we will never know ourselves. If we always feel only one emotion at a time and do not remember other emotions, we are identified with it. When we have another emotion, we forget the first. When we have a third, we forget the first and the second. Very early in life, by imitation and in different other ways, we learn to live in a kind of imaginary state to save ourselves from unpleasantness. So people develop in themselves this capacity to see only one emotion at a time. Remember to work. Remember yourself in one mood. Then remember yourself in another mood. Try to connect them together, and you will see.